Welcome to Casual Tech. Today, you're gonna be coding with me. You're gonna be coding with Cash. I'm gonna try to go through like some of the basics, just to give you like a general understanding. I've got a course that I was learning, and it's called I think it's like 100 Days Python Coding or something like that. We're not gonna be doing Python. We're gonna be doing C# because that's what I do in work essentially. And so, anywho. Today, this is what we're making. So as you can see on the screen, we've got a tip calculator. So essentially what it's going to do, you're at a restaurant, the bill comes, and you want to know how much your overall total is going to be depending on the percentage that the tip is. Now, say this restaurant, the tip percentage is 15, and that's what each person is going to pay. Now, essentially, I'm going to show you a very basic way of doing it, and then we'll go into, probably in another video, I'll show you about where you could do it in methods, and then after I'll show you how to do it in a class, which is a lot better, to be honest. And then I'll also show you how to make the code a bit more safe, if that makes any sense. Safe in regards of once you're putting an input in, it has to be of a particular data type, otherwise your code will crash and you don't want it to crash. So you create your own safeguards for that. Let me explain what this essentially is. So the stack main basically is, this in itself is a method, and this is the one that kind of invokes any code that's in there. So when you run anything, it's going to run from your main method essentially. Now, one of the first things that I wanted to show as well, because as we're going to be writing a bill calculator, we're going to need to ask the user a question, and essentially there's something called console write line. I'll just do this actually, and then tab, and tab, there you go. So what this is, what the write line is, it basically writes the current line to the console, and the console is here. So I'm gonna remove myself because I'm slightly distracting myself. The write line writes to the console, and just to show you that, what loads of people love to do is hello world. You can see in the console, hello world. Okay, cool. So welcome to the tip calculator, and I want another one to ask the user what the bill total is going to be. So what was the total bill? Okay. The next step will be to find a way to take a user's input and essentially use that data. So the first thing I gotta explain to you is about variables. So essentially, see a variable as a container that contains data values. Okay, see it is like food containers, yeah. So a variable is just a container, and the data type is what food you're putting in this container essentially. But with C#, you could only put certain foods in that particular container, and if you want to use a different food, you have to kind of convert it. But more on that when we go through it. So essentially, types, I explained the variables, but there's also data types. One of the things a developer and stuff like that, Google has to be your best friend. So I'm just gonna show you something now. And one of the good things as well, good sites actually, is something called W3 Schools. Is actually amazing to just teach you or help you stuff. Stack Overflow would end up being your best friend as well. Here are your data types. So the ones we're going to be mainly focused on today, your string. So as it says, it stores sequence of characters surrounded by double quotes. So basically, it's kind of stores text. It doesn't have to just be text though, but it just, yeah, characters is probably the best way. But the way that I see it is like it stores text and words and stuff like that. Yeah, double, which we're gonna use, is fraction numbers. So it just stores decimal numbers, for example, and we might use integers as well, but I'm not too sure. But essentially what integers do is it stores whole numbers. These are obviously all the other data types. There's a few other common ones that you probably use, which is boolean, which would be like true or false, but you could use charge, which would just be a single character. So like, for instance, let's just say like a letter A, for example. I said before, the double is the decimal number, and what we need is when the total bill comes, obviously you could put in any number. You might say £200 and 58 pence. So you need that decimal numbers essentially. What we're gonna do, we're gonna call this one total bill, and if you notice, I call that camel casing, which just means that you start the first word with a lowercase and the second word is always like capitals, and so on. So if I was gonna say total bill is this, it will just continue. It'll be a continuation, but we're just gonna do total bill. So now we've got our variable, so this is our container, and now we need to enter the food. So essentially I'm gonna use something called console read line. Okay, so one thing that I forgot to mention was, so essentially what the read line does, it reads a complete string until the user presses enter, which just basically means that we can use it to read a user's input, basically. Now, as you can see, there's an error here, and the reason there's an error is because in C# you don't have the luxury as you do in Python. So Python, you could probably get away with something like this because you don't have to actually declare what data type it is, but on this you do. So I've declared a double, which is a decimal number, but when you're taking in user information, it's essentially a string. So you're taking in a string and a double aren't the same, innit? Basically, you're just two different data types, but I know that there's something called, so you essentially type in the data type that you want, press dot, and there's something called parse. Now what parse does, parse will convert your string into the data type that you want. So it's mostly for integers and doubles. I could be wrong, so I may put something down and say, you know what, there's more you can use it for, but as I'm aware, that's what we do. So first thing we're gonna do, we're just gonna test this out just to see what it's doing. Okay, so what you should see double. So essentially, user input, and this is what we printed to the screen there, basically. So now to explain that, I think I can fly through quite a bit more. So this time we're going to use a int because we just need to know the number of people, and the number of people is never going to be a decimal number. Okay, so we've got number of people. So essentially what I'm doing here, declaring a variable, which is a double, because I'm going to want it in decimals. I'm going to explain why. So essentially when I'm doing the percentages, I'm going to want to take in the number and I'm going to want to divide it by 100 so I can get the decimal. And it's just maths, essentially, what I'm doing now. It's just simple maths. Yeah, so I'm going to want to divide the total bill by the numbers of people that we're splitting by, then you're going to times it by the percentage, and that's going to give you the tip amount. And then after, I'm just gonna wanna do the total bill and divide them by the person. Then we're gonna plus it by the tip amount. And then that's gonna give you the maximum value essentially. So if write this up before and equals. Nah, before I do that, let me show you something. Alright. So that looks pretty good to me. Didn't know I did that as well. So we'll space it out. So we're gonna say if I did it this, 6 people, 12%. There you go. Now if you notice, it's going too far and we don't want that. So we need something that's going to round up. Now, like I said, Google's your best friend. Okay, that's something that I need, and I can slightly remember this anyway. So essentially, I wrote something before. You've got something called, this is basically a class, and this here is a function, which I'll probably explain a bit later, in the next video actually. But essentially what we're doing, we're going to the maths class, we're finding the round function, and we're rounding our calculation, and we want it to 2 decimal places. See that? You've got 200.50. Gonna split the bill by 5 people, and you're gonna do 12%, and there you go. But there's one thing that I do not like about this. I am putting it on the screen. Doesn't look that great. I'm gonna change this to this to make it look a bit better. Do the same thing again. 5, 12, and there you go. That's it. But I'm gonna do a next video after to make this a lot better, because one thing I'm going to show you now is it's gonna be, hey, as a developer, you kind of have to, it's not just about making the code work. Sometimes you got to think about what issues it's gonna cause and what type of bugs you're gonna have, and that's more of like, that's more to do with like creating like unit tests and stuff like that. But I just know off the bat that this isn't the best code, because there's a lot of issues that could happen. Someone puts in letters and bang, codes mash up. What else can happen? You could, because I haven't put anything for this, so essentially what's to stop someone putting in like 100% tip, even though I've given it options. So I could say 5, split between 5 and I want 200. See, so those are something that we're gonna look into in the next one.